Hey, Steph here. I'm gaining more clarity as to why I wanted to come back on YouTube after several years. A big reason for that is that I've had some pretty major transformations happen in my emotional wellness, and I think over the course of making transition videos, a lot of them were really focused more on the mental side of things as opposed to physical changes. There are just so many videos on that. I didn't really feel it was as important to share as much as sharing how my mental world was changing. And I kind of feel myself wanting to continue that, and it maybe isn't even necessarily connected to transness in the same with the same kind of focus as it was talking about I'm this many months on T or I'm this many years on T. And of course my transness is gonna be a part of that because hey, I am indeed trans, but I also think that there's a number of other things that sort of have played a part in the emotional wellness that I have continued to develop over all of this time since I've been away. So I guess I kind of want to share 5 things that I think have really contributed to my emotional wellness continuing to grow. These are not going to be in any particular order because I really don't think that any one of them is more or less important than the others. They all kind of exist in their own kind of ways. First, rest, the concept of rest. I am a habitual worker, and I also have a tendency to use work as an escape from other things. So in my life leading up to where I am now, I would sort of find myself in this pattern where I would something would be sort of triggering or upsetting, and I would kind of just throw myself into some kind of work, and it turned, it brought things to life that would not have come to life otherwise, but it also contributed to significantly more frequent burnouts and things like that were really, really unpleasant and not good for my emotional wellness. So something that I have incorporated into my life more recently, I guess, or over the last year, has been rest. And I guess I can attribute some of that to COVID and something that this whole experience of being laid off and just, all of us kind of having to be home, but incorporating rest into as something that I literally schedule and put on my calendar that during this time I am resting, and that has really contributed significantly to becoming more emotionally well. There's something to be said about having space during the week where I don't have to think about something, and it does so many things, but one of those things, for example, is that it opens my mind up. Actually, it opens my mind up to hearing my inner voice, and it opens my mind up to being more creative. When we're constantly sort of putting our attention somewhere else, there's so much that we miss about ourselves, and that's something that rest has really helped. It also has significantly helped my anxiety and depression symptoms to the point where it's taught me a lot about self-soothing, and rest has become one of those things that if I can adequately incorporate that into my weeks, I'm not gonna have an anxious, nervous breakdown in the same way that I may have before. Next is having hobbies. So I guess this is sort of related to the whole work thing, but I would really, really frequently if I had free time, often I would fill that with doing something for work. And I still have that tendency today, but especially because I do see my work with the record label as work. It is work. And a lot of times when I have free time, I will just work on stuff like that. But I have like incorporated more like hobbies into my life now, and it feels so good because it brings me back to childhood in a sense where like I can just have fun, and like having fun makes me more excited to do work, and I don't burn out as well. So for example, like some of the hobbies that I've taken up, I've been writing a bunch. I really love writing, like kind of more creative stuff that's just for me. Like it's not for anything or anybody. It's just writing that like I want to do. Another one is skateboarding. So I grew up skateboarding, and so like coming back to that as like sort of a hobby has been really fun. Gets my body moving and brings me back to my body, and also just it's fun. That's it. And it kind of just brings that sort of joy to my life, and it's sort of like joy to me is like a muscle memory, and when you experience more joy in your life, then more joy is going to come to you anyway. So lastly, I guess, and this is more of like a general thing, but just having creative outlets in general. I have creative outlets through my various music projects. Like I have 3 different music projects right now, which is super fun. I have like the acoustic style, which is just like my music. I have a band that's more like kind of an indie rock kind of vibe. And then I have one that is more like inspired by collaborations I made with people on the label. So that's more of like a trap, emo trap kind of vibe. And all of those are like, those are creative outlets that if I wasn't, if I didn't have that, there would seriously be something missing. And I think that hobbies are a great place to put creative outlets because we don't all get that from our jobs. Personally, like the jobs that I have taken on, or like the ones that I've pursued, like all do incorporate some kind of creativity, like being part of a record label, teaching. Like these are all things that like you need to be creative in order to like do a good job with those things. But I think if you don't have it in your job, even if you do have it in your job, like having creative outlets as hobbies is really, really enriching. I've also been trying to draw recently, so that's been pretty fun. So yeah, the next sort of aspect that has like contributed to my emotional wellness and the growth of it has been really prioritizing like T4T relationships. So if you're unfamiliar with that kind of terminology, T for T is like transgender for transgender. So oftentimes it's used in the community as a way to talk about like how people date each other, like trans people dating each other. They call that T for T. But I actually like love expanding that term to just mean all relationships with trans people. So that might be friends, spiritual practice partners, like sports, and yeah, like any kind of relationships you have with trans people. That has increased my quality of life significantly. And I think a big reason for that is just that it's when you're hanging out with other trans people and interacting with other trans people, there's sort of this like automatic understanding that you have, and there's not any kind of power dynamic related to your gender. Like you can both kind of see each other eye to eye, and that brings about these relationships that are really, really, really beautiful. I also find that I have like, there's certain like life experiences that trans friends can just relate to, and it's not something that like you have to explain or advocate for yourself. Of course, like obviously you're not going to get along with every trans person just because you're trans, but like there is that sort of overlap. And I find that so many of the relationships that I feed with trans people, like it gives me so much in return, and way more than like I have had, generally speaking with cis people. Being able to share space with other trans people has so significantly improved my emotional wellness. Next is spirituality, and I've mentioned this several times in my channel, but it was something I put a lot of energy toward trying to reconnect with because I felt a really significant void there after I realized that I didn't believe in God. I realized I didn't believe in God, and when I was pretty young, I was maybe like 12 or 13 years old. It was really devastating for me at the time. While I didn't believe in God, and particularly in the ways that I had been taught that God existed, I still felt like there's so much mystery in the world. Like, why are we here? Where did we go when we die? Like, where did things start? How is everything related to each other? Like, these kind of big, like, abstract kind of questions are ones that, like, I cared a lot about and care a lot about philosophy. And I was like, there's some kind of connection there. But I didn't know how it was connected. And so over the past few years, like, I've put a lot more energy into exploring what spirituality was to me and, like, how I wanted to practice it. I feel really, really hesitant to say here that, like, you should develop a spiritual practice. But I think it's less about, like, developing your own spiritual practice and more so, like, finding a way to, like, remember at the end of the day, you are indeed connected to the universe. You are made of the same stuff as literal, like, kind of molecules, as, like, things that were of the moon, and, like, things in the universe and other people and other creatures and other things. Basically noticing the connectedness that you have in the world, and if there is something that you can do to remind you of that, and also to remind you, and I don't want this to sound what's the word, like, morbid at all, because I don't think of it that way, but, like, in our society it is seen as this, but we're all gonna die, so, like, how can we sort of hold that as something that's actually makes where we are right now quite precious? Problems feel smaller when you think about it on a bigger scale like that. And okay, if it is true that we are all gonna die one day, how can I live right now so that, like, I'm doing things I want to do and making the most out of the life that I do have? I don't know if that's, like, more of a philosophical idea or spiritual, but I think of it as spiritual. And my spiritual practice shows in the form of, like, meditation. It shows in the form of, like really practicing noticing my thoughts as objects of consciousness. And, objects of consciousness being, we take things in through our eyes, through our taste, through our nose, through our ears, through our touch. But also thoughts are objects of consciousness. By identifying ourselves with the things that we think, we are actually missing out on the truth of, like, who we are as people, as, like, beings. Our thoughts are objects in consciousness, and we, as opposed to our thoughts, are the awareness of those thoughts. So that's what my spiritual kind of practice is, and the way I focus my attention when I'm incorporating that into my life. So lastly, therapy. Therapy has improved my emotional wellness significantly, and I have had many therapists over the course of my life, and not all of them have been good therapists, or not all of them have been therapists whose modalities agreed with the way that I think. One particular, like, modality that works for the way that I think and the way that I relate to myself and relate to the world is called internal family systems. I love this form of therapy because it's helped me understand, like, the complexities that we do experience as human beings. How can two opposite things be true at the same time? Because they're two different parts. There is no one truth, and there are many truths, many parts of ourselves, and so they can have conflicting ideas. Being able to talk to a professional about navigating those complexities it's been extremely helpful for me, because, and I'm maybe more of a difficult client or patient or whatever. I'm not wanting their advice when I go into a session. I want them to help guide me to a place where I can guide myself. And that is something that they do, when you find the right therapist. Some therapists are going to try to, like, impart their own ideas onto you, and noticing when that's happening can help you avoid some, like, really messed up situations like I have had in the past. Having a space where you can, like, do that processing / like, learn tools to process your emotions, be able to, like, feel validated in what you are feeling and not being afraid of those feelings, like not having more feelings about the feelings that you're already having, like that kind of work has really improved my emotional wellness. But yeah, this is a long video, so anyway, I hope it was somehow helpful. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and talk to you soon. Bye.